One of the things that made me decide to upgrade my X100F camera to my newer X100V was that Fujifilm had included this classic negative film simulation. And the thing with this simulation is that it's so nostalgic and it reminds me of the colors of film photography in a way that no other simulation does. The thing with this simulation is that it seems to behave in a bit of an unpredictable way under different lighting conditions. Fujifilm calls this color contrast, which means that even though there's just one color, let's say red or one tone of blue, if there's a brighter area of that blue or of that red, the darker area will be a different tone than the brighter area. And this is great whenever everything is well lit, or whenever you are taking nature pictures or objects, or whenever you have people in your photography, and whenever there's these skin tones under weird lighting conditions, and the colors start to behave a little bit not in a pleasing way, let's say like that. Let me show you a little trick that I found that changed totally how I edit classic negative. Here I am on Capture One, but you can do exactly the same on Lightroom. Here is the morning of the wedding day, and the son of the bride is not cooperating a lot. He's laying against the wall, and as you can see, the lighting is less than ideal. This is just straight out of the camera. And again, I am on Capture One. You can do the same on Lightroom. If I bring the exposure up, you can see that the colors start to become a tiny bit more natural. I don't want to mess up with so many other parts whenever I'm just trying to deal with this area. And I figure out that these tools are doing their best not to touch saturation. That's why we have, of course, the saturation slider. So this is not really imitating the analog process. The one tool that is the closest to the analog process actually may be the curve, because here you affect the light or the brightness of your image in a way that is connected to the red, green, and blue channel. And I'm not talking about the Luma one, because the Luma one is basically just doing exactly what's happening up here without touching saturation. Knowing this simple thing affects everything. Reducing the contrast, and that contrast that you took out, try to add it back with a curve. And trying to pay attention on the darker area of the curve, not in the midtones, because you want the color in the dark areas. And immediately you see that the boy comes alive. And here is a before and after. Before, after. Such a little thing, and you already brought the correct amount of color and saturation to the darker areas of your image. Let me show you another example. This was during daylight, of course, but you can see again that the couple are standing in a place where the light is just not hitting them very well. Let's try to bring up the exposure a tiny bit. Let's try to bring down the background, because now it's kind of a little bit blown up. And still we start to see that thing that I was telling you, color contrast in the areas that the light is just not hitting the bride or the groom. We still see some fade here. And just by reducing the contrast and again adding the contrast back, this transition between the lighter colors and the darker tones is so much better. And here, even though there's shadow, it just feels still like natural skin tone. See before and then after. Before and after. I tell you, with this little hack, you can really use classic negative and those beautiful tones under any circumstance. Here's another one. For example, the bride was just coming out of her ceremony, and here in this case, I will probably just bring the exposure up a little bit. See that I bring the exposure up, and the face of the bride gets a good color. I mean, I don't have any problem with that. We bring back the clouds, but the face of the groom, he's again just facing away from the light. And let me show you an after. I just did that little trick with a curve again, and we see the face of the groom much more natural in color. Here's a father of the bride. This is a different bride entering. As we know, hotels don't have the best light, but you know, this is the first time that the father looked at the bride, so we had no option but to shoot it here. And the tones on his face again just start to look gray, desaturated, just by adding a little bit of that curve, by reducing contrast there. It looks so much more natural before and after. I find it much better to not mess with the saturation slider, even though you could. Let's go here and try to mess with the saturation slider, because you start messing with the saturation slider, you start to affect the saturation in all of the areas of your image. But with the other change, with the curves, you just affect the darker areas of your image and just add the saturation there. I think it's a small but extremely useful tip if you like classic negative. I hope that this was useful to you guys. I highly encourage you to use curves much more than messing up with the exposure sliders or the contrast if you want to understand a little bit more of the analog process. And yeah, guys, if you want to hear anything else about Fujifilm, color profiles, and how I edit them, just let me know and I'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much for watching.